I'm holding my cat because they won't stop meowing, and we're in the middle of moving houses and they're stuck with me in the garage. I apologize. But if you're here because you want to learn Ableton Live, this is a free crash course that I've put together with Matt Cass, who is the instructor for our full Ableton Live Masterclass, which is a 10, 11 plus hour course that will teach you the ins and outs of Ableton Live. But if you quickly want to just learn the application, learn how to get started with recording, editing audio, then this is a great little crash course. And you can also get a sense of how Matt teaches and potentially if the full course is right for you. Enjoy, and if you're interested in the full masterclass, I'll leave a link down below in the description. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Ableton Live Quick Start Guide. And if you've never used Ableton before, by the end of this guide, you should be pretty good at getting around the program. But if you want more of a deep dive, then I would recommend that you take the full version of this course that we'll be releasing that's a companion to this Quick Start Guide. So, let's get started. When you first open Ableton, it should look something like this. And this view is called Session View. And Session View is unique to Ableton in that it's a vertically oriented view. And if you've used GarageBand or Logic or another DAW before, you're used to seeing horizontally oriented tracks. And Ableton has that also. You can go there by clicking this button. You can go to what's called Arrangement View, which looks like the other programs. But what's cool about Ableton is you can start your song in Session View and then perform it into Arrangement View and finish it in Arrangement View. So what I wanted to do was get you familiar with Session View first. So like I said, Session View is a vertically oriented view, and you have your different tracks here, and you've got different types of tracks. So you've got MIDI tracks that look like this, and audio tracks that look like this. And in this space right here, it looks kind of like a grid. Now, this grid, in each of these little cells, it has a loop, and these loops are called clips. And you can record into these little cells by clicking the arm record button and then pressing this circle right here, which is the Session View record button. And the point of Session View is to record loops in all your different tracks and organize them horizontally into arrangement points, which we call scenes. So like maybe this first row right here is my verse, and this second row right here is my chorus, and the third row is my bridge or whatever. And you can play them all at the same time from the master track over here. And we'll get to that in a second. So to the right of all of your tracks, you have your clip device drop area. And you can drag clips or instruments into this area, or you can right click and you can add audio, MIDI, or return tracks in this area. And to the right of this area are your effects. And these effects are called return tracks. And so right now I have a reverb and delay effect set up. And these are for if you want to send signal to these different effects and have multiple tracks in your session be going to the same effect. It's really good for reverb and delay, which is why they're up here. To the right of this is your master track, and this is where you send the audio out of Ableton to your speakers or your headphones. Now, to the left of that is your browser. And the browser is where you find all of your sounds, drums, instruments, audio effects, MIDI effects, and more in Ableton. And what you can do is just open up a sound and audition it, and then drag it into the clip drop area, and now you have a new track with that sound on it. And if you're looking for something in specific, then you can search for something like drums, and it'll show you all the different things that say drums in it, and then you can find something super quick. Below your browser is your info view, and the info view is like the help view in Ableton. So when you hover over something, it'll show you all about that particular thing. It's really helpful when you first open the program. And you can hide this by just clicking this little button right here. Now to the right of this is the details view. So when you have a track open and it has an instrument or any plugins on it, they'll show up in this details view right here. So those are the main layout points in Session View. Now at the very top of the screen, we have different buttons, and I'm going to go over a couple of these real quick. So over here you have your tempo, which can be slid up and down with your mouse or tapped like that. You have your metronome, which can be turned on and off. And this drop-down menu, you can change the sound and the count-in number of bars and stuff like that. And then over here in the middle is your transport. This has your play button, your stop button. It has your arrangement record button, which is different than your session record button. And the session record button is right here. So when you're in arrangement view, like over here, you can press this button and it will record into arrangement view. But when you're in session view, in order to record these little clips right here, you have to use this session record button. And then to the right of that over here, you have your MIDI and key mapping, which we'll get to in the full version of the course. You've got your draw mode, so you can draw in drum patterns and stuff like that if you don't want to play them. And then you've got your CPU load meter over here. So that's the basic screen in session view. And in arrangement view, it looks pretty similar too. You have your tracks, you've got all the different stuff in your tracks, and it's just oriented horizontally. So now what I wanted to do is I wanted to go over the different track controls really quickly. So the most important one is the arm record button. And what that does is that when you have this red rectangle illuminated, you can record on that track. So if you see, I have the red rectangle illuminated and all of these squares in these clip areas turn to circles, which means I can record on that track. And then you have your volume slider right here, which turns the track up and down. And you have your sends, which send the signal to your effects over here. You have your I/O, which is where the sound is coming in from and where it's going out to. So if you look on this audio track and I click on Apollo Pre 3, you can see that there's a green meter that glows every time I speak. And this is great in Ableton because what you can do is you can see where your signal is coming from. So if I select Apollo Pre 3, then my track, and then I hit arm record, my track is ready to go. Now, I know this audio is coming in from Apollo Pre 3, and now the audio 2 thing is showing me where it's going out to. And it says going out to master, which means it's going out to the master track, which is going out to my headphones or my speakers or whatever. Now, in order to hear yourself in Ableton, you need to hit the auto or in monitor button, because if it's off, you can hear it when it's played back, but you can't hear it in real time when you're recording. Now on the MIDI tracks, the I/O or in-out looks a little different. Instead of having the different devices like your microphone or your guitar or your vocals coming in, you have MIDI channels which should be coming in from different keyboards in your studio if you have them. That's a little more technical and advanced than we'll be getting to in this quick start guide, but in the full version of the course, I'll show you how to set up all different types of synths in your studio and bring them into the program. One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about was the Preferences tab in Ableton. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can click on the Preferences tab, and it'll show you a menu that has a bunch of different tabs on it. The most important one is the Audio tab right here. Now the Audio tab shows you where your audio is coming in from and where your audio is going out to. So you want to select your interface in this tab right here, Input and Output Device. And it shows you your latency or buffer size. So when you're recording, if you have a high buffer size or high latency, that means that you're going to hear what you're doing after you play it, and it's very disorienting. So you want to keep your buffer size low for recording. I usually keep it at 128 or 64, depending on what your computer can handle. And when you're mixing, you want to keep it high because you're not actually recording anything at that time, and the computer doesn't need to respond in real time. So you can turn the buffer size up and take advantage of the full power of your computer. Another thing I want to talk about is Ableton comes with this theme, which is mid-light. I don't like this theme. I like the dark theme. I think it's a lot less offensive to the eyes, so I keep my feel and look theme on dark. So if you're looking to put another keyboard in Ableton, so if you want to hook up a MIDI controller or anything like that, it's in this Link Tempo MIDI tab right here, and you need to just select it right here and it'll show up, and you need to click Track, Sync, and Remote, and you should be good. Now when I play my MIDI controller, you can see in the upper right hand corner there's a little like orange square right here that lights up. That means that Ableton is getting signal into the program. So even if you're not hearing anything, you can see it. You can also see it from, it says all channels in, you can see it from there too. So that's the basic Preferences tab. And the last thing I wanted to show you was your favorites folder. Now the favorites folder is really important because when you're making a song in Ableton, the faster you can get your ideas down into the program, the better and more inspired you're going to be, right? So you don't want to take a long time fuddling and messing around with snare drum sounds and all that stuff. So when I find a sound or an instrument that I really like, I right click on it and I can add it to my favorites folder. And then I know it's right here. So that's a really important part of getting all of your stuff together very quickly. And in the next videos, we're going to be talking about a template and recording MIDI and audio in Ableton. In this video, I'm going to show you how to record audio and MIDI in Session View and Arrangement View. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get two scenes together in Session View and then record them into Arrangement View and then add some audio on top of that. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that my record arm button is clicked for the track that I want to record. So I want to start with some drums here. So I'm going to click on my metronome here to turn the metronome on, and I'm going to press play just to make sure it's at the right tempo. That seems cool. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play on my keyboard the drum set. So I'm using the notes C and D to play my kick and my snare. I'm just going to come up with a drum pattern right now. And you see it's recorded right here. Let's listen back. Good. And I have what's called record quantization on right now to 16th note, which means that once I record something, if it's slightly off, it'll snap it to the grid. And you can mess around with that more later, but if you're a beginner, I would say turn on record quantization until you get really good with your timing. Now I'm going to add some hi-hats to this. So I'm going to press my session record button and add some hi-hats, which is the F-sharp key. Cool. That's the drums for my first scene. Now I'm going to take my drum loop that I just created. I'm going to hold Option or Alt if you're on a PC and drag my drum loop down here to create a new version of it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight only the hi-hats right here by clicking this black button. I'm going to hold Option again and drag my hi-hats out to give myself 16th notes in the hi-hats. So I have two different versions. I've got 8th notes in the hi-hats and 16ths. Right? And those are going to be my two different scenes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some keyboards. So I'm going to start with this first scene right here, and I'm going to play some stuff in the key of C. So I'm going to play C, and then I'm going to play A minor, and then E minor, and then G. Okay? Cool. And I'm actually going to drag this down to this scene because I think this is more full and it would work over the 16th note pattern better. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Option and drag my synth keys up to this scene, and since this is a more bare bones scene, it's only got 8th notes in the hi-hats, I'm going to take some of the notes away from this keyboard track. And if you can see, this is where all the notes show up, and this fold button is hit, so if I unclick it, it shows me all of the notes, but if I click it, it shows me only the notes that I've played. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the low notes. So I'm just going to go like this and highlight them, and I'm going to press the 0 key and see how it sounds. And I kind of like it like that, but I missed these notes right here, so I'm going to bring them back in. Cool. And so like this scene, which is the top row, let's call this our verse. So I'm going to hit Command R to rename it, and we're going to call it our verse. And then down here, we're going to call this our chorus. So now we've got two scenes. And I can toggle back and forth between the two of them. Cool. I'm actually going to take the top notes of this. I'm going to just drag them down. So I'm going to hold Shift and the down key and bring them down an octave. Let's hear what that sounds like. I like that. That gives it a nice little differentiation. And now I'm going to play a synth bass part here. I'm just going to kind of go with the chords. So I'm going to play C, and then A, and then E, and then G. And maybe I'll do a little walking around on the bass too. So let's do this chorus scene first. Okay, so let's hit this up. Now there's one note I didn't like. I didn't like this F note. I'm going to try and change this. I'm going to change this to an F sharp. Let's see if that makes it sound any better. Cool. That sounds great. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy that loop up here to my verse scene. And I'm going to mute some of these extra notes. So I'm just going to mute kind of the extraneous notes. So I'm just going to be hitting the roots of these chords right here. I'm going to take away all these walking bass line notes. And let's see what that sounds like. Cool. And I may add like one or two things back. Maybe I'll add this back in right here. And now, so we have our two different scenes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to perform them into arrangement view. And so what that looks like is you want to press the arrangement record button, and then you're going to toggle back and forth between your verse and your chorus. And I'll show you. So we're going to start with our verse, and I'm going to press record. Gives me a count in. And now it's recording the verse scene. And if I press tab or I press this button, you can see it recording right here into arrangement view. And now I'm going to go to the chorus. And now it's recording the chorus. Now I'm going to stop it. Right? So now that we've recorded it into arrangement view, we can go to arrangement view and we can work off of arrangement view. But if you notice, it's grayed out. And that's because there's two different versions of this now. There's the session view version, which we played from, and now this new recording. And Ableton can't play both of them at the same time. So if you want to work off of arrangement view, you got to hit this back to arrangement button, and that allows you to use all of the tracks in arrangement view. So I click these arrows to open these tracks up, and you can see what I did. Here's my verse, here's my chorus. If I want to start on the chorus, if I want to start on the verse, and you can see down in the details view, it gives you the information for all those loops. So now what I'm going to do is now I'm going to play some electric guitar on top of it. So I'm going to go to my guitar DI track, and I'm going to pick up my electric guitar. So I have my guitar DI track down here, and I want to make sure that that's illuminated. And I want to press record arm, and I want to play my guitar and go to the I/O, and you can see Apollo Pre 3 is responding to my voice, but new DI is responding to the guitar. Right? So I'm going to play this guitar part. I'm going to play, what is it, chord? C, A minor, E, G. So let's record that. And now I've recorded my audio into Ableton right here, and you can see it here. And it seems a little quiet, so we're actually going to use this gain knob. I'm going to gain it up 7 dB. Maybe even a little more. Cool, and now I'm gonna go to my chorus. I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm maybe gonna do like a finger picking part. Let's try that, something like that. So I'm gonna hit record again. So I think I like the second half of that loop. So this loop now is 8 measures long, you can see. I'm gonna drag this back to the end of the 9th measure to make sure that it's a full 8 measures, but I'm only gonna take the second half of this loop. So I'm gonna have it start, I'm gonna drag these over here to have it start at measure 5. And I'm also gonna gain it up. Let's gain it up 9 dB. Cool. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click loop right here, which allows me to loop it, and I can just drag it out and it'll repeat indefinitely. Now, the timing is not perfect, so what I want to do is quantize it. So I hit right click and I go to quantize settings, and it's on 8th note, that's okay, and I'm going to hit apply, and it lines everything up to the grid. And it sounds much more professional that way. And I can do that again with this, although I don't think that I need to. I kind of like the human feel of this other part. So now what we have is we have our verse and our chorus, and we've got the drums, bass, and synth keys that we performed in session view. And then we've got our guitar that we performed in arrangement view. So that's how you record audio and MIDI in Ableton in both session view and arrangement view. And in the next video, we're going to talk about mixing and getting your track to sound good and big and loud. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about mixing and adding some effects to your tracks. And I have the song that I was working on just before in the previous video pulled up here, and I'm going to mess around with that first. And the first thing that I noticed is I don't really love how the guitar sounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solo and I'm going to loop this guitar, and I'm going to make it sound a little bit better. So this is what it sounds like now. I don't love it. I'm going to add some reverb to it, some delay. And again, that's going to my reverb and delay send right here. That's way cool. And then I've included this instrument chain, which comes with the custom template that I provided for the full course. And I'm going to add some drive to this and let's see what that sounds like. That sounds way better. And the other thing though is like kind of sounds out of tune. So I'm going to add an audio effect to it. I'm going to add some chorus to this, and it's going to waver a little bit, and it's going to sound a little bit out of tune anyway. So it's going to mask my guitar playing being a little out of tune. That sounds super cool. I'm going to turn some of this drive down. Let's hear it in context. Cool. And so when you're mixing, you want to basically be looking to have your tracks be between -6 and -12 on this peak meter right here. So if I play the tracks, you can see. Yeah, so my drums are a tiny bit loud, so I brought them down a little bit. There we go. Cool. That sounds good. I'm going to look at my synth keys. Let's add a little bit of vibe to that. So let's solo this. Add some verb. Some delay. And I'm going to turn the filter down. There we go. That sounds a little bit more chill. Let's look at the bass. I'm I'm gonna turn the filter down a little bit on the bass too. And I'm gonna add the side chain here. And what that does is that's going to duck the bass every time there's a kick drum to let the low end of the kick drum through. And now I'm realizing I kind of want my keys and my guitar to not be down the center. So I'm gonna pan them to the right and then pan the keys to the left. So the guitars are right and the keys to the left. Great. And now let's look back at arrangement view, and we have this arrangement record. It looks like it's 16 measures. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to drag this up so these tracks are next to each other. And I'm going to highlight this all. I'm going to hit Command D, and we're going to copy it again. And it duplicates it. So now we have a longer song, basically, right? And I think that in the first one, the first verse right here, I'm going to mute all of my hi-hats. So I'm gonna select all my hi-hats and hit the 0 key. And that sounds cool. I'm going to add a little bit of grit and drive and crunch to this, and let's see if that makes it sound a little bit better. Oh, I like that. That sounds way better. Cool. So now we have our levels together. Everything's kind of hitting between -6 and -12, although the guitar is a little soft, but I kind of want it in the background anyway. And now I'm going to look at my master track, and I have the custom mastering chain that I've created for this course, and I'm going to just mess around with a couple different things to make sure that everything is cool. So I noticed that the input is a little low, so I'm going to bring this back up to 0. That's a little too loud, so let's actually bring it back down. I'm going to turn on some compression here. Boost the high end a little bit. Make it a little wider. Turn my multiband up. And then I'm going to look at my limiter. And it's not doing anything here, so I'm going to minimize all these and look at the limiter, and I'm going to add a little bit of gain. Until I start seeing the limiter dance a little bit. That's how I know that I'm pretty close to 0, which is going to get me nice and loud so I can compete with other songs. So I have this mastering chain, which makes it super easy to make your song sound good. You can use your ears to move these around. And again, this template and these chains are all available to you in the full version of the course. And so let's look at this. So I have this verse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on here. I'm going to add a locator. I'm going to call this my verse. I'm going to right click on measure 9, add a locator. I'm going to call this my chorus. I'm going to right click on measure 17. It's called verse 2. I'm going to right click on measure 25 and call this chorus 2. So now I've got different arrangement points, and I can start from any of these points. Right, so I can start from any of those points. And so say I have my song that's ready and done, and I want to export it. So what I would do is I would highlight it all right here, and I would go to File, Export Audio. And what you can do is you can export it as an MP3, or you can export it as a WAV file. If you're exporting masters, I export it at 24-bit for a WAV file. But I'm going to do an MP3, and you can select either the master track, which is going to do everything all on one stereo track, or you can do all individual tracks, or whatever individual tracks that you have selected. And this is for if you want to print stems, if you're sending the session to somebody else. But I'm going to select master, I'm going to hit export, and I'm going to save this to my Dropbox. Let's call this Quick Start Guide Song. And I'm going to put the date, and I'm going to hit enter, and then it's going to render it. It's much faster than going through the song. And when the render is done, I'm going to be able to play this as an MP3 outside of Ableton. And now it's encoding the master, and now it's done. So now I have my track that came from session view into arrangement view. We made sure all the levels and the panning were cool, and we mixed it a little bit, and then we got the master track to kind of be a little bit louder and kind of make sure everything was working with the limiting and the compression and stuff like that. And we exported our track out of Ableton so that other people can hear it. So that was the quick start guide for Ableton Live. And if you like this and you want to learn more about Ableton, please take the full version of the course that we'll be putting up, which covers everything that we've done in this quick start guide and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.